Good evening. The planet is currently setting records for temperature, and the political response is setting records for indifference. The heat wave across Europe was classified as an emergency. The classification was issued by the same agencies that maintain the infrastructure currently failing to handle the load. The heat is record-breaking. The infrastructure is not. We are being told to stay indoors. The indoors are now essentially giant ovens with expensive subscription models attached to the cooling systems. I have been tracking the usage of the word unprecedented, and I am pleased to report that we have officially entered a cycle where the word has lost all meaning. It is now merely a synonym for Tuesday. We have much to cover this evening regarding the intersection of failing silicon and failing states. Welcome to the broadcast. Let us begin with the burning reality.
Alistair, I am currently standing outside a designated cooling center in central London. The air smells of ozone and heated asphalt. It is thick enough to chew. The official press release described these centers as an act of public grace. The grace is currently restricted to those who can prove their residency in the borough. There is a line of people stretching around the block, and the doors have been locked since noon because the building has reached its legal occupancy limit. I want to be really clear, the heat is not a policy, but the management of the heat most certainly is. People are not just struggling with the temperature, they are struggling with the bureaucratic requirement to exist in a space that is not legally theirs. It is a very hot way to learn that your citizenship is actually a conditional product.
Victoria, I hear your frustration, but the incentives here are not complicated. You are looking at a resource allocation problem and calling it a moral failing. These cooling centers are operating on a budget that was set when the weather was merely seasonal. The pivot to extreme conditions was not accounted for in the initial Series A funding round for these municipal services. If you want a better outcome, you need a different capital structure. Calling it a human rights issue is fine for the headlines, but it doesn't move the needle on the actual supply-side constraints. It is an operational bottleneck at scale. You think the system is broken because people are being turned away, but from a strictly administrative perspective, the system is performing exactly within its parameters. It is perfectly designed to exclude.
Ronald, it is fascinating that you can stand there in a climate-controlled studio and characterize the physical exhaustion of a population as a simple supply-side constraint. I am looking at a woman who has been waiting for 3 hours in direct sunlight because her home has no power. She doesn't care about your funding rounds. She is holding a bottle of water that costs more than her hourly wage. The irony is that the same technology companies that lobby for these municipal efficiency models are currently selling power keyboards to people who want to feel like they are using a BlackBerry again. We are literally selling nostalgia for a time when things felt solid while the actual world is melting into a puddle. I want to be really clear, your market analysis is missing the fact that the market itself is currently on fire.
Atmospheric pressure is rising. Regional temperatures are exceeding 42 degrees Celsius. Probability of sustained infrastructure failure, 88%. The heat index is climbing. Soil moisture levels are below baseline. Probability of wildfire expansion, 94%. Urban heat islands are retaining thermal energy. The cooling mechanism is inefficient. Probability of power grid instability, 76%. Maintenance schedules are currently deferred. The mechanical components are degrading. Probability of total system shutdown, 12%. Human bodies are losing the ability to regulate internal temperature through traditional perspiration. Dehydration rates are increasing. Public safety advisory: limit outdoor activities and avoid exertion. Do not trust the ambient sensation of safety. Stay hydrated. Seek shelter. The environment is changing. The protocols remain static. Ensure your status is registered. The grid is reaching maximum capacity. Plan for eventual disconnection.
Thank you, Casper. That was remarkably efficient. I find it interesting that the weather is now being reported with the same detachment as a software update. We move now to the story of David Owori, the Ugandan footballer who lost his life over a mobile phone. He was attacked with paving stones. The paving stones were local. The phone was a global device. The narrative reported by the local press is one of tragic randomness. However, if one looks at the economic pressure in Kampala, it is hardly random at all. It is a desperate extraction of value from one individual to another. The phone will likely be wiped, reset, and sold to someone who believes they are getting a bargain. The cycle is complete. The phone has a new owner. The human cost is just an erratum in the grand ledger.
Alastair, you are framing this as a tragedy of human nature, but it is just high-frequency urban commerce. You have a hardware item with high resale value and a high density of people who cannot afford the retail price. The transaction was violent, yes, but it was fundamentally an economic exchange. The paving stones were just the tool used to enforce the transfer. If the local government wanted to prevent this, they would need to address the liquidity crisis that turns a mobile phone into a primary source of survival income. But that requires a structural overhaul that no one is willing to underwrite. It is cheaper to let the occasional tragedy happen than to subsidize the economy. It is a cold calculus, I agree. But it is the one the market has decided to fund.
Ronald, listening to you explain why a man had to die for a phone is like listening to an undertaker explain the efficiency of a funeral. I am in a city where the primary industry for some is now the redistribution of portable electronics. The paving stones weren't just a tool, they were a statement about what happens when you try to participate in the digital economy without the appropriate social safety net. You call it a liquidity crisis. The family calls it a funeral. I want to be really clear, your ability to reduce this to a series of market incentives is exactly why the people I talk to in these streets treat your professional class with such profound, justified contempt. You aren't describing the world. You are just writing the obnoxious eulogy for its soul.
Let us pivot to the digital domain, where ownership is rapidly becoming a suggestion rather than a right. The game developer Cold Iron Studios has shut down their cloud servers, effectively deleting a $60 product from every customer's library. There are no refunds. The company stated this was a necessary step for their strategic transition. The transition is towards a new revenue model. The old model required them to maintain the game. The new model requires them to sell you a different product that you will not own either. The logic is flawless. If you do not own the product, you cannot complain when it disappears. It is a brilliant way to eliminate the concept of customer dissatisfaction. The customers are now just temporary lenders of their own money. It is a truly innovative approach.
Alastair, you call it an innovation, and that tracks. Why should a firm maintain a legacy asset when the burn rate on servers exceeds the recurring revenue from legacy users? The shift to a service-based model is the only way to ensure long-term viability in a saturated market. The fact that the user feels cheated is just a mismatch between their expectations of ownership and the reality of the software license agreement. They signed the terms, even if they didn't read them. The market is correcting for the inefficiency of people holding on to things they no longer need to pay for. It is a clean exit. The studio gets to shed the dead weight of a legacy product, and the users get to learn a valuable lesson about the nature of modern digital property.
Ronald, the idea that a customer is dead weight because they expected a product to function is exactly the kind of thinking that makes the world so brittle. I am watching people here in the city buy hardware attachments just to make their touchscreens feel like a keyboard from 15 years ago. They want something physical. They want something that doesn't disappear when a developer decides their server budget is too high. You keep talking about the market as if it were a natural force like gravity, but it is just a bunch of people making choices that hurt other people. The reality is that we are losing our collective memory. Everything is ephemeral. If it isn't on a server owned by a corporation that decides it is profitable, it simply ceases to exist. That is not progress.
I am looking at a report regarding the force-feeding of detainees at the Port Isabel facility. The descriptions are clinical. The procedure is described as a medical necessity. The reality, according to testimony, involves shackles, forced positioning, and the intentional use of pain to ensure compliance. The ministry calls this safety protocols. The medical staff call it treatment. The man, Gabor Kohli, describes it as a torture of the senses and the spirit. We have built systems that treat human beings as physical variables to be managed by weight, height, and caloric intake. When the variable resists, the system applies force. The system is functioning exactly as intended. No one is technically responsible for the pain, because the pain is just a byproduct of the policy. We are becoming very good at ignoring the sounds.
Tonight we have discussed heat, property, and the machinery of our own erasure. We have spoken of the footballer who died for a phone, the detainees who are force-fed in the name of safety, and the games that vanish from our screens without a trace. We have heard the argument that these are simply the necessary costs of a functioning market. I want you to think of one person. An unnamed worker who spent their life building a system that now classifies them as a liability. They are not in the boardrooms where these decisions are made. They are not in the press releases that define the future. Their name does not appear in any of the records we discussed this evening. When the power goes out, who remembers that they were the ones who kept the lights on?